What would you do for love? And more importantly, where would you draw the line? Is love truly enough to change someone, to rewrite their story, to erase their mistakes? Or is it possible that sometimes love blinds us to the harsh truths staring us in the face? These are the kinds of questions we don't like to think about. We want to believe in fairy tales, in the idea that people can change, and that love conquers all. But what happens when love goes wrong? When the very person you give your heart to becomes the one who breaks it, in the most devastating way imaginable? Today's story is about a woman named Kanisha Nealy. She is a woman of unshakable faith, overflowing compassion, and a belief in second chances so strong that she was willing to gamble not only her heart, but her entire life. And in the end, well, her story is a warning that not every gamble pays off. Before I start this narration fully, let me ask you a quick question. How many of you know someone who ignored every red flag because they believed they could fix a person? Maybe it's you. Perhaps it's your best friend, your sibling, your coworker. Drop a comment below if you've ever tried to be someone's saving grace because, trust me, this story is going to hit close to home. Kanisha Nealy was no ordinary woman. Born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, she was the type of person who seemed to radiate positivity wherever she went. If you met her, you'd never forget her. She had this laugh that could light up a room, and a smile so warm it felt like a hug. She wasn't just a dreamer, she was a doer. A single mom to two beautiful daughters, she juggled work, school, and motherhood with the kind of determination that makes you wonder how one person can handle so much. Kenisha earned a degree in healthcare administration while raising her kids. Not only that, but she also became a licensed bail bondsman, a career that wasn't just about making money for her. It was about helping people navigate the darkest moments of their lives. You see, Kenisha believed in redemption. She believed in giving people a chance no matter how bleak their past. And maybe that belief would become her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. Let me paint a picture for you quickly. Imagine a woman who had every reason to give up. Two kids to raise on her own, financial pressures that could have crushed anyone. But she never let it break her spirit. She was building a life for her girls. She bought a house. She became a beacon of hope and resilience in her community. People admired her. They looked up to her. But even strong women like Kenisha have moments of vulnerability. Moments where the loneliness creeps in, where the weight of doing it all alone becomes just too much. And in one of those moments, a Facebook message arrived. Now, let's be honest. How many of us have gotten random messages on social media and thought, who is this? Maybe you ignore it. Maybe you're curious and click to see what they have to say. For Kenisha, that message was from Moses Chisholmst, a man who, at the time, was sitting behind bars. Let's pause right there. A man in prison slides into your DMs. What would you do? Let me know in the comments because this is where the debate starts. Some of you might say, no way, red flag, block and move on. But others might think, well, everyone deserves a second chance, right? And Kenisha, well, she believed in second chances more than most. Moses was no stranger to crime. His record wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. Assault with a deadly weapon, robbery, possession of firearms. You name it, he'd probably done it. But the thing about Moses was, he had a way with words. He painted himself as a misunderstood man, someone who had been dealt a bad hand but was ready to turn his life around. And Kenisha, with her heart of gold, believed him. Their relationship started slowly. Letters, phone calls, carefully supervised visits. Moses played his role perfectly. He spoke of redemption, of wanting to be a better man. He told Kenisha everything she wanted to hear. That he'd found God, that he'd changed, that he was ready to build a family. And Kenisha? She saw potential where others saw the danger. She saw a man who could be saved. I want to pause here because this is where things start to get tricky. Have you ever believed in someone so much that you ignored the warning signs? Maybe your friends told you they weren't good for you. Maybe your family begged you to walk away. But you didn't listen, did you? Because you were sure, absolutely sure, that you could make it work. That was Kenisha. By the time Moses proposed from behind prison walls, she said yes without hesitation. She believed in their love story. She believed it would all work out. And so, in December 2021, she married him in a prison visiting room. Imagine that. A bride in a white dress, surrounded not by flowers and friends, but by the cold, sterile walls of a prison. And yet, she was smiling. She was hopeful. I can't help but wonder, what was she thinking at that moment? Was she dreaming of the future, of the day Moses would come home and they'd start their life together? Did she believe her love could rewrite his story? Because here's the thing about love. It's powerful, but it's not a miracle worker. And sometimes it blinds us to the reality staring us in the face. Kenisha didn't just marry Moses, she built a life around him. She redecorated her home. She made plans for their future. She even brought her daughters along on this journey, introducing Moses as the father figure they never had. And for a little while, it looked like her gamble had paid off. When Moses was released in 2022, their life together seemed picture perfect. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. And this is where Kenisha's story takes a turn. You're watching True Crime Stories 24/7. Thanks for joining. Please do well to subscribe and like this video to support us. When Moses Chisholmst walked out of those prison gates in 2022, Kenisha was there waiting for him. She had spent months preparing for this moment, pouring her heart, soul, and bank account into creating the perfect life for them. She wanted everything to be just right. The house, the furniture, even the honeymoon she'd planned for them in Atlantic City. It was like the fairy tale she had been dreaming of was finally coming true. And for a brief moment, it seemed like it was. They took their honeymoon photos, smiling on the boardwalk, holding hands, and enjoying romantic dinners. Kenisha's social media was filled with posts about her amazing husband and their new beginning. Every picture she shared seemed to scream, "Look at us. We made it. Love really does conquer all." But behind those carefully curated photos, cracks were already beginning to form. At first, they were small, almost imperceptible. Moses had trouble adjusting to life outside of prison. Simple things like grocery shopping or waiting in line would send him into a tailspin of frustration. He wasn't used to the rhythm of the outside world, and it showed. Kenisha brushed it off, telling herself and everyone else that it was just part of his adjustment period. "He'll get there," she'd say. "He just needs time." But time didn't seem to help. Moses wasn't looking for a fresh start. He was looking for control. Kenisha's daughters, Aaliyah and Jayla, were the first to notice. They were just kids, but kids see things adults sometimes miss. They saw how Moses would snap over little things, how he would sulk when he didn't get his way. They noticed how their mom, usually so strong and confident, started tiptoeing around him, choosing her words carefully, trying not to set him off. It wasn't long before Moses' frustration turned into something darker. He started hoarding food in his room, a behavior left over from his time in prison. He didn't want to share. He didn't want anyone in his space. He treated their home like a prison yard, claiming territories and lashing out when he felt his authority was challenged. And yet, Kenisha held on. She clung to the belief that this was just a rough patch, that her love could fix this. She poured all her energy into making him happy, into keeping the peace. She ignored the warning signs, even when they became impossible to miss. By the spring of 2023, things were spiraling. Moses refused to find a job, adding financial strain to their household. Kenisha was juggling everything: her daughters, her career, the bills, and now a husband who seemed determined to do nothing but take. And yet, on social media, she kept up the facade. Her posts were still filled with love and optimism, snapshots of a life that didn't really exist. Her friends and family started to notice. They saw the stress in her eyes, the way she seemed more distant, more guarded. Some of them tried to intervene. Her brother even offered to do a deep dive into Moses' past to show her just how dangerous he really was. But Kenisha wouldn't hear it. "You don't believe in him," she'd say. "You don't believe in us." And just like that, Moses had done what so many abusers do. He isolated her. Slowly but surely, he made sure she was cut off from the people who loved her most. He didn't have to lift a finger. He let Kenisha do it herself, driven by her desperate need to prove everyone wrong. The breaking point came in December 2023. Moses had been drinking. A lot. It wasn't the first time, but this night was different. They got into an argument and things escalated. He hit her. Over and over again. Kenisha managed to grab her handgun, and in the struggle, she shot him in the leg. For a moment, it seemed like this might be the wake-up call she needed. Moses was arrested and charged with domestic assault. The police report detailed the severity of Kenisha's injuries and the trauma her daughters endured, having witnessed the whole thing. It was clear Moses was dangerous. He had crossed a line no one should ever cross. But here's the part that will leave you shaking your head. Within days, Kenisha bailed him out. She paid $3,000 to bring him back home. Just like that, they were back to their twisted version of normalcy. Why? Why would she do that? It's a question so many people ask, and the answer is as heartbreaking as it is complex. Kenisha still believed in him. She believed in their love, and maybe deep down, she believed she didn't deserve better. By early 2024, Kenisha was pregnant again. She announced it as though it were proof that everything was going to be okay. A new beginning, she called it. But Moses wasn't interested. He didn't go to prenatal appointments. He didn't help prepare for the baby's arrival. When their daughter Kamari was born prematurely in June, Moses barely showed up at the hospital. Kenisha, on the other hand, was there every day, watching over her tiny baby in the NICU. She poured all her love into Kamari, hoping this new life would somehow fix everything that had gone wrong. But by the time Kamari came home in late July, it was clear Moses wasn't changing. He grew more volatile, more resentful. The baby's cries drove him into fits of rage. He slammed doors, shouted, and stormed out of the house. The older girls retreated to their rooms, trying to stay out of his way. Kenisha was walking on eggshells, trying to hold her crumbling family together. And then, August 4th, 2024, arrived. The day that would change everything. August 4th started as just another day in Hoffman, North Carolina. The small town was buzzing with the usual hum of life. A quiet, close-knit community where everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where people didn't lock their doors. And the biggest concern of the day might be what to cook for Sunday dinner. But by nightfall, McCoy Drive would be swarmed with flashing lights and police sirens. The quiet peace of the neighborhood would be shattered forever. Inside the Nealy home, the tension had reached a boiling point. Over the past year, Moses Chisholm's behavior had gone from concerning to outright dangerous. He was volatile, unpredictable, and suffocatingly controlling. Every day was a minefield for Kenisha. One wrong word, one glance he didn't like, and the entire house would erupt into chaos. But Kenisha kept going, as she always did. She kept up appearances, posting cheerful pictures of her newborn daughter Kamari on social media. She smiled in the photos, holding Kamari close as if she could will her world back into the loving, safe space she had once dreamed of. Her posts were filled with hope, determination, and love for her children. But behind the carefully curated facade, her life was unraveling. Moses had become increasingly hostile, especially since Kamari's birth. He hated the crying, the sleepless nights, and the attention Kenisha gave their newborn. It was as if he saw Kamari as a rival, competing for the spotlight he believed he deserved. His resentment grew with every passing day, and Kenisha bore the brunt of it. She was exhausted, juggling the demands of a premature baby, her older daughters, and a husband who had become a ticking time bomb. The signs were all there. Neighbors had started to notice the shouting matches and loud crashes coming from the Nealy home. Kenisha's friends, the few who were still in touch with her, pleaded with her to leave. But Kenisha was caught in a cycle so many victims of abuse find themselves in. A cycle of hope and fear, of believing things would get better and fearing the consequences if they didn't. That morning, Moses was angrier than usual. No one knows exactly what triggered him. Maybe it was something small, something inconsequential. But with Moses, the smallest spark could ignite a wildfire. The argument escalated quickly, and the entire house felt the tension. Kenisha's older daughters, Aaliyah and Jayla, retreated to their rooms, doing their best to stay out of the crossfire. Baby Kamari, too young to understand, lay in her crib, crying. The argument turned violent. Moses, fueled by his rage, grabbed his gun. Kenisha must have known how bad it was going to get. She must have felt the fear creeping up her spine. But Kenisha wasn't just afraid for herself. She was afraid for her daughters. Somehow, she managed to get Aliyah and Jayla out of the house. The girls ran to a neighbor's home, tears streaming down their faces as they begged for help. But for Kenisha, there was no escape. By the time the police arrived, the house was eerily silent. Officers approached cautiously, their hands on their holsters, ready for anything. When they reached the master bedroom, the door was locked. From inside, they heard a single gunshot. When they finally forced the door open, the scene they found was one they would never forget. Kenisha was on the floor, lifeless, the victim of Moses's final act of violence. Moses lay nearby, his gun still in his hand. He had taken his own life, leaving behind a legacy of pain and destruction. In the corner of the room, baby Kamari lay unharmed in her crib. She would never know the mother who had fought so hard to bring her into the world, or the father who had failed her in every way imaginable. The news spread quickly through Hoffman. People were shocked, heartbroken, and angry. How could something so horrific happen in their quiet little town? How could a woman like Kenisha, kind, hardworking, and so full of life, be taken in such a brutal way? Kenisha's funeral was held on August 13, 2024. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects, to honor the woman who had touched so many lives. But as they mourned her loss, they couldn't help but wonder, could this have been prevented? Kenisha's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers of domestic violence and the devastating impact it can have, not just on the victim, but on their children, their family, and their community. It's a story of a woman who gave everything she had to a man who didn't deserve it. A woman who believed in redemption and second chances, but who paid the ultimate price for her faith. As we reflect on Kenisha's life, we're left with hard questions. Why do so many victims of abuse stay? Why do they believe, against all odds, that their abuser can change? And what can we do? What can you do to help someone in a situation like this? Here's the truth. Abuse isn't always obvious. It doesn't always start with a punch or a slap. It starts with control, with isolation, with small acts that chip away at someone's sense of self. And by the time it turns violent, the victim is often so trapped mentally, emotionally, and sometimes financially that leaving feels impossible. But trust me, there's hope. There's always hope. Kenisha believed in second chances. She believed in love. But in the end, her faith in Moses cost her everything. And the question remains, was it worth it? Could anything have been done to save her? This is why we tell these stories. Not to blame, but to learn. To recognize the warning signs, to understand the patterns, and to remember that love should never come at the cost of your safety. Kenisha's story isn't just a tragedy, it's a call to action. If you or someone you know is in a situation like this, don't wait. Reach out. Speak up. Because love is supposed to lift you up, not bring you down. And no one, I mean absolutely no one, deserves what happened to Kenisha. Kanisha Nealy's life was filled with love, strength, and compassion. Her story, as tragic as it is, can be a powerful force for change. Let it remind us all to speak up, to reach out, and to never stop fighting for a world where stories like hers don't have to be told. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for listening and for bearing witness to Kenisha's story. It's not an easy one to hear, but it's an important one. Share her story, talk about it. Because by doing so, you might just save someone's life. And that, my friends, is how we honor Kenisha's memory. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.